When a billionaire's disabled son was humiliated in front of the entire school, no one expected the quiet scholarship girl to rise. What happened next shook the whole academy. The cafeteria at Crestwood Academy glittered like a palace. Glass walls reflected polished floors, trays clattered in a rhythm that was supposed to feel normal, and voices bounced off the ceiling like a chorus of wealth. The air smelled of sushi and pizza, of privilege layered in every bite. At the center of it all, Elijah Whitmore, known as EJ, walked carefully with his tray balanced against one arm and his crutch supporting the other. His steps were uneven, a rhythm he never asked for, each tap of the crutch echoing like a drumbeat of difference. He kept his eyes low, hoping to make it to a corner table without being noticed. But Crestwood never let the difference slip past unseen. Jason Miller's shadow fell across EJ before the boy could sit. Jason's laugh, sharp and practiced, sliced through the chatter. Behind him, Connor and Bryce closed in, their phones already in hand, record buttons glowing red. Jason didn't need to say a word. A shove to the chest sent EJ stumbling, his tray tilting, milk and spaghetti crashing to the floor. The cafeteria erupted, not in outrage, but in excitement. Laughter rolled like thunder, cruel and rhythmic. Billionaire baby can't even hold his food. EJ scrambled to steady himself, one hand reaching for his crutch, but Connor was faster. He yanked it away and lifted it high, waving it like a trophy. The crowd howled, phones shooting upward like 100 hungry eyes. The chant began low, then grew louder, echoing off the walls. Fight, fight, fight. Some students laughed with their mouths wide open, others smirked nervously, afraid of being next if they stayed silent. A few whispered, but none stepped in. The air thickened with the buzz of recording phones, every screen trained on EJ's humiliation as if cruelty was entertainment. Jason stepped closer, towering, his voice dripping with mockery. Careful, limp, don't fall. He shoved again, harder this time, juice staining EJ's shirt like a badge of failure. The crowd roared. Connor spun the crutch overhead, asking who wants it, while Bryce zoomed in on EJ's trembling hands. Each second stretched, the noise swelling until it felt like the entire cafeteria was feeding on the moment. EJ's breath came shallow, his shoulders hunched, his face burning red. He wanted to disappear, but there was nowhere to go. Every table had turned into an arena seat, every student an eager spectator. Phones tilted higher, capturing every flinch, every stumble, as though humiliation was content worth streaming. The chant pounded like war drums, relentless, cruel, unstoppable. Fight, fight, fight. The walls seemed to close in, the lights too bright, the sound unbearable. EJ's eyes darted around the room, desperate for escape, but no one moved to help. Even the teachers had vanished, leaving the kingdom to its children. In that moment, Elijah Whitmore stood completely alone, surrounded not just by 3 bullies, but by an entire system that cheered for his fall. And the cruelest twist of all was not that he was being mocked, but that the laughter grew louder with every stumble. Crestwood Academy, polished and proud, had turned into an arena of spectacle, where arrogance was king and silence was treated as weakness. What none of them realized was that silence had its own strength. And soon, the room would learn that the quietest presence could deliver the loudest lesson. The Whitmore penthouse towered above the city skyline, a fortress of glass and steel that glowed against the night. From the outside it looked like success, rooms lined with rare art and marble floors polished until they gleamed. But inside, silence was louder than any luxury. At 10 years old, EJ wandered through hallways wide enough to hold a soccer game, yet he never felt smaller. His footsteps echoed back to him like reminders that no one else was there. Once, there had been laughter. His mother Clara filled the penthouse with warmth that money could never buy. She had a soft voice that carried bedtime stories about constellations, whispering to EJ that the stars didn't care how fast you walked, they would shine for you anyway. He believed her, until the night cancer took her. It was quiet when she left, quiet in a way that never ended. Her absence carved a hollow space in EJ's world that no diamond chandelier could light. After her death, the penthouse became more like an office than a home. Richard Whitmore, Billionaire CEO, spoke in schedules and mergers, not lullabies. He told himself he was providing, that one day EJ would understand. But contracts cannot tuck you in at night, and meetings do not chase away nightmares. Richard's love was hidden under plane tickets and late calls, always postponed, never cancelled but never arriving either. So EJ shrank into himself. At school, the whispers followed him everywhere. Crippled prince. Billionaire baby. Kids mimicked the limp in his walk, sneakers squeaking in cruel rhythm down the hall. Some sneered, "Does daddy's money carry you too?" He hated that one most, because his father's money couldn't fix the only thing EJ wanted more than anything else, to feel normal. To walk without eyes watching, to stand without mockery. In the cafeteria, he ate alone. At recess, he sat on the edge, pretending the ache in his legs was why he never joined, but the truth was he had no one to join with. Each insult, each laugh carved a deeper scar, one he tried to cover with silence. At night, in the enormous bedroom that overlooked the city lights, he pressed his face into a pillow and whispered the stories his mother once told him, trying to believe the stars still shone for him. But the stars looked far away from behind penthouse glass, and EJ felt farther still. He carried his mother's words like a shield, but a shield is heavy when you're the only one holding it. The penthouse walls displayed everything success could purchase, yet EJ's life was missing what no fortune could provide. Richard thought a name etched on buildings and charities would be enough, but his son needed something simpler, a hand on his shoulder, a voice reminding him he mattered. Instead, the boy grew surrounded by wealth yet starved of love, moving through hallways that echoed with loneliness. The cruel twist of EJ's world was not that he lacked anything money could buy, but that he lacked the one thing money never could, the presence of his father and the comfort of being seen as just another child. And in that absence, humiliation clung to him like a shadow, waiting for the moment when the world would remind him again how small it thought he was. The dojo smelled of sweat and old wood, its mats worn thin, its mirrors cracked at the edges. Sunlight leaked through broken blinds in narrow beams, dust floating in the air like tiny ghosts. It was quiet there, almost too quiet, except for the sound of a young girl's bare feet sliding across the floor. Amara Johnson bowed to no one, then raised her stance, fists clenched, eyes steady. She was only 10, but her movements carried the weight of 1,000 hours spent repeating the same forms. Her father once stood in this very spot, his laughter filling the room, his hands guiding hers into proper balance. Master Anthony Johnson was more than a martial artist. In a neighborhood where gangs waited on street corners like traps, he had built this dojo as a sanctuary. His mantra was simple, repeated until it became part of her bones. Never throw the first punch. Never fight for ego. Protect the weak. He lived those words, and Amara believed he always would. Until the day his heart failed. One moment he was demonstrating a form, his voice deep and sure. The next, silence swallowed the dojo. Amara remembered the ambulance lights bouncing off the cracked windows, her mother's cry in the doorway, the sound of finality. Just like that, the world shifted. Her father was gone, and with him, the laughter that made the dojo alive. Her mother, Yvonne, worked nights at the hospital, double shifts that bent her back and left her hands trembling from exhaustion. Bills piled high on the kitchen counter, shoes worn thin until the soles frayed, clothes passed down or bought from thrift stores. Yet what Amara inherited was not wealth. It was her father's code. She returned to the dojo day after day, bowing to a ghost. Every stance was a conversation with the man she lost. Every punch was an echo of his lessons. She did not brag. She did not show off. She blended in, silent, steady, eyes always watchful. At Crestwood Academy, she was invisible for different reasons. The whispers followed her down the polished halls. Charity girl. Look at those shoes. She doesn't belong here. Students glanced at her second-hand backpack, the zipper catching whenever she pulled it, her Tupperware lunches of rice and beans that smelled foreign among trays of catered sushi and milkshakes. They laughed, but she didn't flinch. She kept eating, her hands steady, her gaze fixed on the food before her. Where others saw weakness, she carried steel hidden in silence. She did not need the world to recognize her strength. She only needed to remember her father's voice. Protect the weak. That command hummed in her veins like fire. Her classmates mistook her restraint for fear, her silence for submission. They thought she had nothing. What they could not see was that inside her was a legacy forged by discipline and grief. A girl they dismissed as charity was in truth the daughter of a man who taught an entire neighborhood to stand tall. And though the halls of Crestwood treated her as invisible, fate was already weaving her path. One day, her silence would be mistaken for weakness. And that day, the world would discover what silence looks like when it finally moves. Crestwood Academy gleamed like a monument to privilege. The hallways shone as if polished daily by invisible hands, marble floors reflecting the glow of designer sneakers. Tesla doors hissed open at drop-off, chauffeurs carrying monogrammed backpacks as though they were crown jewels. Rolex watches flashed beneath fluorescent lights, and laughter echoed through the halls like a currency only the privileged could afford. Within this world, Jason Miller reigned supreme. His blonde hair slicked back, his smirk rehearsed, his family name etched on the gymnasium wall as if it were part of the architecture itself. He did not walk the halls so much as command them, Connor and Bryce trailing behind like shadows cast by his arrogance. Every insult Jason tossed was treated like scripture, every laugh he barked echoed down corridors until even teachers looked away. Students jockeyed for a place near his orbit, desperate to be close to his throne, afraid of what exile from it might mean. EJ moved quietly through these same halls, his crutch tapping out a rhythm he hated, his shoulders hunched against the stairs. The whispers followed him like arrows. Crippled prince. Billionaire baby. They sneered not just at his limp, but at his father's money, a cruel irony that turned privilege into another weapon against him. He kept his eyes on the floor, as though the tiles might shield him from the cruelty above. Amara walked the same halls with shoes her mother bought at a clearance rack, jeans worn soft from too many washes. She carried a backpack that snagged each time the zipper caught, lunches in Tupperware that smelled of rice and beans while others bought pizza and sushi with prepaid cards. The whispers trailed her too. Charity girl. Doesn't belong here. Yet she walked steady, her silence sharper than any retort. Where EJ shrank, Amara observed. Where he endured, she prepared. To Jason and his followers, both were targets. EJ because he carried weakness they could exploit. Amara because she carried difference they could ridicule. Crestwood was not a school, it was a hierarchy, its rules written in cruelty and its language spoken through laughter at someone else's expense. Phones were always ready, cameras lifted the instant tension sparked. Students no longer asked if they should stop something. They only asked, will this go viral? It was a culture that rewarded spectacle over kindness, turning humiliation into entertainment. The day was bright, laughter bouncing off the walls as trays clattered like cymbals in the cafeteria. Jason and his crew cut through the room like kings through a conquered land. EJ tried to shrink further into his seat, praying they would pass him by, while Amara sat at the far corner, chopsticks poised midair, her eyes watching everything. For a brief moment, EJ's gaze met hers across the room. No words were spoken, but something passed between them, quiet and steady, like two storm fronts colliding in silence. She saw the fear in his hunched shoulders, he saw the steel in her eyes. Neither of them moved, yet the moment carried weight, a warning that the balance of power was about to shift. Jason's shadow stretched across EJ's table, his smirk widening, Connor already pulling out his phone, Bryce cracking a joke loud enough to spark laughter around them. The cafeteria hummed with expectation. They had seen this before. Another victim. Another clip. Another round of chants echoing until the walls themselves seemed complicit. The crowd leaned in, hungry, every phone raised like an audience waiting for blood. The cruelty was not just Jason's. It belonged to all of them. The bullies, the bystanders, the silent ones holding up their screens. Crestwood was ready to feast again, and in that silence before the storm, it felt inevitable that something was about to break. The cafeteria was louder than usual, a Friday storm of voices and laughter ricocheting off polished walls. Hundreds of students crammed into long rows of tables, trays clattering, screens glowing, every phone raised like a weapon waiting for its moment. At the center of the noise stood Jason Miller, Connor, and Bryce, circling Elijah Whitmore like predators around prey. EJ's crutch hung high in Connor's hand, spinning overhead like a trophy, while Jason shoved EJ's chest again, milk dripping from his shirt like white paint marking humiliation. The chant thundered louder, fight fight fight, until the sound felt endless. And then, in the corner where silence usually lived, Amara Johnson moved. She rose from her seat without hurry, chopsticks still in one hand, her face calm. She crossed the cafeteria like someone walking into the heart of a storm. At first, no one noticed. All eyes were on EJ stumbling backward, Jason sneering, Connor waving the crutch. But then the crowd shifted, and phones tilted, catching the moment Amara bent down. Not to confront Jason. Not to fight. She picked up EJ's tray, balanced it back onto the table, and straightened his chair with steady hands. The laughter thinned, curiosity slipping in. Silence cracked through the chant. Jason smirked wider, mistaking her calm for weakness. Well, look who it is. The charity girl. Connor held the crutch higher. You his bodyguard now? Going to limp with him too? The cafeteria howled again, but Amara didn't flinch. She turned, her eyes locking with EJ's, and in that quiet gaze he read the words she didn't speak. You are not alone. Jason stepped closer, close enough for his breath to brush her cheek. His fist cocked back, knuckles white. The crowd gasped, phones zooming in, ready for the impact. But when Jason swung, Amara wasn't there. With one fluid sidestep, she let his punch cut empty air. His momentum betrayed him, carrying him forward, and with a subtle pivot of her hips and a gentle redirection of her hand, Jason slammed into the table with a crash that rattled trays and silenced laughter. The cafeteria froze. Hundreds of phones shook as their owners forgot to breathe. Jason sprawled against the table, stunned, and for the first time, the room saw Amara not as a charity case but as something else entirely. Connor's face twisted with fury. He charged, a wall of muscle, his kick aimed at EJ, but Amara moved faster. Her hands flashed, catching his leg, twisting it with precision, sending him flipping through the air. He landed flat on his back, the thud echoing like a drumbeat. Gasps rippled through the room. Laughter had died completely, replaced by shock. Some whispered, others cursed. Bryce froze, his phone trembling in his hand. The crowd shifted again, leaning in, no longer laughing but watching with wide eyes. For the first time all year, EJ was no longer the only one in focus. Amara stood steady, her breath calm, as if she had brushed away a fly instead of disarming the kings of Crestwood's cafeteria. Jason scrambled up, his face red, his arrogance cracking. He lunged again, desperate to reclaim control, but Amara waited until the last second. She pivoted, guided his weight, and sent him crashing into the cafeteria wall. Phones shook harder. Screams rose from the crowd. What is she doing? Did you see that? She didn't even hit him. The whispers spread like fire. She wasn't fighting. She was demonstrating. Somewhere deep inside, Amara heard her father's voice, the memory as sharp as if he stood behind her. Strength isn't about proving you can hurt someone. Strength is knowing you don't have to. Jason staggered, Connor groaned on the floor, and the cafeteria was no longer ruled by laughter but by awe. Connor tried once more, roaring, swinging wide, but Amara intercepted, her hand catching his wrist midair. In one seamless motion, she twisted, flipped him, and pinned him gently to the ground with just enough pressure to hold him. The crowd erupted, but this time it was not laughter. It was disbelief, it was awe, it was recognition. She hadn't thrown a single punch. She had turned their force against them, redirecting arrogance into humiliation without breaking her father's code. She stood over them, calm, silent, unshaken. Then she bent down, picked up EJ's crutch, and placed it back in his hand. "Stand tall," she whispered, her voice steady enough to cut through the roar. EJ looked at her, his breath caught in his chest. For the first time, he did. His shoulders straightened, his back lifted, and he stood, not as a victim but as someone who finally found his voice. The cafeteria roared again, not with cruelty, but with something different. Cheers rose, applause, chants not for a fight but for truth. Justice, justice, justice. Phones still recorded, but their screens no longer captured humiliation. They captured a legacy. Amara Johnson, the charity girl, had folded Crestwood's golden boys without striking once. And Elijah Whitmore, the boy mocked as crippled prince, stood taller than he ever had before. In that moment, Crestwood Academy learned that silence was not weakness. Silence could be steel. And when steel finally moved, arrogance collapsed under its own weight. The city glittered beneath the Whitmore penthouse, towers of glass reflecting 1,000 points of light. Inside, the silence was broken only by the low hum of a laptop and the soft vibration of a phone left on the desk. Richard Whitmore leaned back in his chair, glasses low on his nose, scrolling through contracts that determined the shape of tomorrow. The phone buzzed again, another notification flashing across the screen. He almost ignored it. Billionaire's son targeted by bullies. It sounded like tabloid noise, something beneath him. His thumb hovered over delete until the thumbnail caught his eye. A freeze frame. EJ's crutch held in the air like a trophy, his son's face twisted in panic. Richard froze. His hand tightened. For once, he clicked play. The screen came alive with the cafeteria's chaos. The shove, the laughter, the chant pounding fight fight fight. He watched his boy stumble, milk dripping down his shirt, hands trembling. Richard's jaw clenched, his breath caught. He had seen that posture before. Shoulders curled inward, eyes cast down. He had seen it every night at dinner when EJ sat silent, every morning when EJ left without a word. And he had told himself it would pass. Then, through the noise, a girl stepped into the frame. Calm. Steady. Silent. Amara Johnson. She moved like water, redirecting fists, guiding momentum. Jason crumpled into a table, Connor sprawled on the floor, all while she stood untouched. And then she bent, picked up the crutch, and placed it back in EJ's hands. "Stand tall," she whispered. Richard leaned forward, his chest tight, as if those words were meant for him as well. He replayed the clip. Slower this time. He saw the moment EJ straightened, shoulders back, eyes lifted. He heard his son's voice, quiet but firm, "Yes, it is." The cafeteria roared, but in the penthouse there was only silence. And in that silence another voice rose, soft, familiar, almost forgotten. Clara. His wife. "The stars don't care how fast you walk, EJ. They shine for you anyway." Richard's throat closed. He set the phone down but couldn't look away. His mind raced through the years of missed therapy sessions, the concerts he never attended, the nights he told himself providing was the same as parenting. His wealth had bought him everything, but it had not bought him this. The sight of his son standing tall. The sound of his boy's voice steady with conviction. And the trigger for it all was not his money, not his name, but the steady hand of a girl who owned nothing but discipline and silence. Richard closed his laptop, the merger forgotten. He picked up his phone again and typed, then deleted, then typed once more. "Proud of you. I'm on my way." His finger hovered, then pressed send. The message left him breathless. He hadn't said those words in years. Another message followed, this one to his assistant. Cancel the meetings. Reschedule the board. I'm going to Crestwood. Outside, the city pulsed with neon and traffic, but Richard saw none of it. For the first time, he wasn't leading with power. He was moving with presence. In the end, it wasn't the contracts, the skyscrapers, or the empire he built that broke through his walls. It was a girl the world mocked as charity, who showed him his son was already stronger than he had dared to believe. And that realization struck harder than any boardroom loss. It was the first real victory of his life. The next morning the cafeteria no longer felt like a place for lunch. It had become a courtroom. Students filled every table, their phones raised, their whispers electric with anticipation. Teachers lined the back walls, stiff in their silence, while parents of Jason and Connor arrived in polished suits and pearls, their expressions tight with shame they couldn't hide. At the front, Principal Harrington stood with papers trembling in his hand. Yesterday's incident has received widespread attention, he began, his voice faltering as nervous laughter rippled through the room. Video evidence has made the truth clear. The altercation was not initiated by Amara Johnson or Elijah Whitmore. They acted in defense, with restraint. The words dropped heavy, breaking the balance of power that had ruled Crestwood for years. All eyes turned to Jason and Connor, their swagger gone, their shoulders hunched. Their parents nudged them forward, a quiet demand that cut deeper than any punishment. Jason swallowed, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry," he muttered, his eyes darting anywhere but at EJ and Amara. "We shouldn't have mocked you. We shouldn't have pushed you." Connor followed, his jaw clenched, his words forced. "We embarrassed ourselves. We embarrassed our families." The cafeteria held its breath, the silence sharp. For a moment it seemed that was all there would be, shallow apologies from voices once so loud. But Amara rose from her seat, calm, steady, her gaze slicing through the air. "Don't just apologize to us," she said, her voice even but cutting. "Apologize to everyone you've mocked, everyone you made small, because we weren't your first targets, just your last." The word struck harder than any throw. Jason froze, his lips trembling, his pride unraveling under the weight of her demand. Connor looked away, shame crawling across his face. Then Jason turned, his voice louder, breaking against the silence. "We're sorry, to everyone." Connor nodded, his tone heavier now. "We were wrong." The room erupted. Cheers, applause, stomping feet shook the polished floor. Students who had once laughed now clapped until their palms burned. For the first time Crestwood's cafeteria was not an arena of cruelty but a place of justice. In the middle of the noise EJ stood taller than he ever had before. His crutch steady in his hand, his voice rising above the roar. "You don't get to decide who I am anymore." The crowd froze. The words cut deeper than fists, heavier than chants. This was the boy they had mocked, the one they called Crippled Prince. Now he spoke like someone who refused to bend. The cheers swelled again, louder, chants of justice echoing until the walls themselves seemed to tremble. Richard stood at the edge of the crowd, silent, watching his son. He had arrived without fanfare, without assistants or schedules, just a father standing among students. For years he had believed his empire was his legacy, but in that moment he understood it was something smaller, simpler. A boy standing tall. A girl reminding an entire school that silence is not weakness. After the meeting ended, after Jason and Connor slunk away, after the applause finally faded, Richard waited by the door. EJ approached, his steps uneven but steady, his eyes meeting his father's. For once there were no contracts, no deadlines between them. Richard placed a hand on his son's shoulder, his voice breaking. "Your mother always said someone would help you stand tall. I think we just met her." EJ smiled faintly. "She didn't just help me stand, Dad. She helped you too." That night the penthouse felt different. Father and son sat on the couch, no screens, no distractions, just presence. For the first time in years silence wasn't hollow. It was full. In that quiet, courage and connection filled the space money could never buy. They mocked a boy for his limp. They dismissed a girl for her silence. They believed arrogance ruled the room. But when fists flew, it wasn't power or wealth that silenced the crowd. It was discipline. It was truth. It was two children standing together, refusing to break. And in the heart of Crestwood Academy, the calmest move had shaken the loudest room. If you enjoyed this story, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories.